Hey, everybody. This is Troy over at Uncomfortable Truths. Thanks for checking me out. So, today we're talking a little bit about a debate that Krystal and Saagar had over at Breaking Points about immigration. Now, it was a really fantastic debate. I urge any of you that might have an extra 45 minutes to go ahead and check out their full debate because they really do a fantastic job of kind of arguing their own points. Now, I wanted to bring this up because I do think that there is a point to be made about what's going on when the left talks about immigration and what happens when the right is talking about immigration. So, throughout the debate, Saagar makes kind of one point after another that does sound a little bit harsh, and it never really gets addressed, and it's frankly just kind of dismissed out of hand. Whereas Krystal tends to make more of, I guess, kind of just emotional pleading, saying, like, well, in the past, immigrants have been really great for our country, and there's no evidence that immigrants really commit crimes at higher levels. Now, I actually don't think that's true. We actually have very little data on what the amount of crime is that illegal immigrants commit when they come to the United States. And part of the reason for that is that illegal immigrants are less likely to report crime because they might get deported. So just because you're getting data that says that they're not committing crimes as much, well, they're also not reporting crimes as much about what's going on in their own community. So it is a little bit of a catch 22 to either prove or disprove that point. But also it's something that I really find a little bit frustrating when people can't accept the idea that yes, this actually is our country and the people living in this country can actually decide what it's going to look like in the future. And maybe we want to actually get things a little bit calmer before we bring other people into it. For example, the left and the right can't get along with each other for anything in a bunch of different areas in our lives. Like we can't agree on whether or not, up is up and down is down, it seems like. So I don't know that bringing more people and having mass immigration into our country at a time of extreme societal unrest is really likely to lead to a great outcome. So while I absolutely love immigrants and I've had really nothing but positive experiences in my own life with immigrants that I've met, I do think that we have every right, just like every other country in the world, to say, no, actually, if you don't have a specific skill that we're looking for, then you can't come to our country. And you definitely can't come to our country if you can't support yourself, you don't have your own housing set up, you don't speak the language. If you can't meet these basic requirements, then you can't come here. Every country in the world has some sort of cap on immigration. We should be no different. And this idea of open borders, I think, is absolutely ridiculous. But I want to point out that Saagar does a fantastic job here, basically just saying, like, yeah, I am concerned about my own countrymen, and I don't care to adopt the rest of the world's problems. So he does a fantastic job. Let's go ahead and watch their debate, and then I'll come back with my reaction.
My care for the poor and the lower class extends to the borders of the United States. For everybody beyond that, I hope for the best for you, but it's not my problem. And that can sound harsh if you want, but I've seen enough of the world.
So just stopping there for just a second. Yeah, it does sound harsh, but if you take the other perspective that we can help everybody in the world, then you're literally just taking off more than you can chew. Also, to the extent that you're not going to be able to help your actual citizens. Like, we have people in the United States that are sleeping in the streets. So, the idea that we're going to somehow go and help all of these people from all over the world is not only childish and naive, it's also basically ignoring your responsibility to the actual American people that you're supposed to serve. So, while it does sound harsh, I 100% agree with Saagar on this.
Know that there is so much suffering that is out there that there's absolutely nothing I can do about it. My parents are from India. I feel no obligation to street urchins in India. I think that's the Indian government's problem. I think it's really sad. I've seen a lot of them, in horrible sanitary conditions, but I believe that the number is so vast and so grand that there's a certain hubris to the extent that we can think that we can extend those rights and benefits to everybody.
And that's where you and I are just fundamentally.
So this is very much a realist perspective. So just because he's saying these things, obviously it doesn't mean that people that agree with Saagar, like myself, it doesn't mean that you don't care about these things or that you are somehow a monster for not wanting a solution. The fact is that you can only deal with so many problems at once. Like people go on to say dumb things like, oh, well, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Well, you can't actually because you haven't been able to solve a single one of these problems. So you haven't been able to solve that your own citizens and your own veterans sleep on the street, but somehow you're going to solve that and make sure that immigrants all over the world are going to be able to come here and live a decent life. I mean, just the fact that we have a housing crisis and the cost of rent has skyrocketed, the odds that, millennials and the generations below are going to be able to afford houses en masse is a constant concern for people. So your own citizens don't think that they're going to have a decent life necessarily, or at least a gainful life where they can comfortably be able to buy a house and raise a family. And you think you're going to bring in more people and provide the same level of comfort for everybody. I just think it's a childish view, but I do think it's important. I do think we should go ahead and listen to what Krystal has to say in response.
Different
And that's
because
fine.
the fact
Yeah.
that we can't solve every problem for every person in the world does not harden my heart to being able to do what we can within the bounds of things that, again, are actually good for our country.
Okay, so this is where there's a bit of a disconnect when it comes to Krystal, I think. So Krystal seems to just take it on faith that having immigration is always going to be a net positive. Well, that obviously isn't the case. And if you watch the full interview, Saagar goes on and he talks a little bit about instances where we have had immigration en masse, and it's actually caused a number of problems in the US. So while I don't want to oversimplify Krystal's arguments, she is largely just making an argument saying that, hey, well, isn't it really unfair or uncool that red states, act excited when they say, look, people are leaving blue states and blue cities to move to Texas and Florida. And she says, well, isn't it hypocritical that they're so excited that these people move to these other places, but they're not excited when they get immigrants? Honestly, that's an extremely weak argument. That's not an argument I think that a serious person should really consider to mean much. I mean, your whole point is just saying that, well, hey, why is it that Republican states aren't upset when they get American citizens from another state coming into their country, but they're upset when they get illegal immigrants from unknown places showing up? Well, you're not comparing the same thing. Those are literally completely different things that you are describing. So, of course, people want immigrants that are highly skilled and highly educated that can provide something to our country. And honestly, they don't want low skilled workers that are going to come in and take jobs from our own people that may not have fancy doctorate education. So it's not wrong to say that, hey, we do need to control our immigration. We have every right to control our immigration. And I think when people say that, well, we should take immigrants and they don't actually explain, okay, well, how are we going to provide for these immigrants when we can't provide for our own people? I think that's a very fair question, and it's something that we should really consider. So I don't think that Krystal's arguments really hold much muster. The only other thing that she does really point out that I think should be addressed is she says, well, immigrants commit crimes at lesser rates than natural born citizens. Well, we actually have very limited evidence on this. Texas is actually a state that does keep track of data from immigrants' crimes because they actually ask the question, like, okay, is this person an immigrant? Are they here legally or illegally? And they consider that when they make these statistics. And in that, yeah, illegal immigrants do actually tend to commit crime less, or it's reported less in that instance. Well, I would bring up that if we're so unconcerned about the crime from illegal immigrants, how come on the one hand, people that are so concerned about illegal immigration from the left are talking about these people are coming here because they're being human trafficked, they're coming here because of drug dealers, and then they turn around and say, well, there's really not that much crime when it suits their purposes on the other side of things. The other issue that people really don't seem to want to address is sometimes illegal immigrants that are living in communities together, they just don't call the police. So if they're not calling the police and they're not getting arrested, then of course these crimes are going to be reported less. So the data is likely just not that accurate. But I do want to give credit to Krystal and Saagar both for actually taking the time to have the debate. I really, again, want to just urge everybody to check out the whole thing. It's in the description below. If you have the time, it's worth hearing the other side's perspective, because I can understand why people on the left like hear me saying like, yeah, I actually do think we should have a very strict immigration policy, especially when right now things with our country are already just ready to explode at any moment. Like people on the left and right are barely able to get along. So I don't think bringing in more people is right now is really the right thing to do. And we have every right as people that actually live here and as citizens to say, actually, no, right now we don't want a bunch of immigration. We get to set this standard, and nobody is entitled to just come into the United States. I don't think they should be. And I think it should be an extremely strict policy to actually get these people in here, because I can't just move to another country just because I might happen to like it. Let's say hypothetically, I just really love Japan and I want to move to Japan. Well, they have a point-based system and it's extremely hard to get in. You have to demonstrate that you can financially support yourself, that you can understand the language, and these are reasonable things to ask. They're reasonable things to expect. We get to decide who comes into the country. So anyway, everybody, I just want to leave you with this. Try not to be too judgmental about somebody else's perspective until you hear them out. I think this video really was fantastic of, showing respect. Though I do think Saagar definitely got interrupted quite a bit more, but leaving that aside, all in all, I think it was done really well. And everybody, I just want to thank you again for watching the show. It means an awful lot to me. Go ahead and hit like and subscribe, and I'm excited to talk to you guys soon. Take care, everybody.